Order the regular meeting of the Hollis School Board on today's Wednesday, September 4th, 2024. Our agenda originally called for school board candidate interviews. We do have an individual interested party tonight. Can I discuss something with the board before we move forward? Okay. We do have an interested candidate. I wanted to get a feel from the board if you guys wanted to proceed with an interview, since she is a known person to the board. Would you like to still ask the questions, or would you like to maybe just let her make a quick statement of interest, her history, and then we can make an agenda adjustment to go into that non-public session? Thoughts and discussion?
I think that allowing Amy Kellner to just make a statement for anybody watching at home who somehow may not be familiar with her. Is that possible if you watch this at home? But I think that it's good just for record keeping. I don't feel a need to ask her any questions.
Okay.
I feel similarly.
Same.
Excellent.
If I could just interject.
Sure.
I don't think there'd be a need to go into non-public. I would just recommend adding a deliberative item either immediately after that or during deliberations.
Okay, which would be the more appropriate spot for that? Can we do it right away?
We can do it right away, and then the candidate knows when they are leaving that they need to get sworn in. And
You do not.
I do not.
Okay, gotcha. All right. Seeing no further discussion, I'll take a motion on accepting Amy Kellner to fill our vacant slot until the March election and meeting.
So moved.
Any seconds?
Second.
Second. All those in favor? 400. Amy Kellner, welcome back to the board. Amy is not going to be seated this evening. She and I just spoke briefly. She will join the board fully at our October meeting. However, Amy will make plans to be sworn in officially back onto the board, and she'll be able to then start coming to committee meetings. We will have to have a discussion about some committee assignments possibly moving around with the departure of our former member, but that is not something that we're going to undertake tonight. Okay? So I will take a motion for an agenda adjustment to remove the non-public from our agenda.
I move we remove the non-public session from today's agenda.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none? All those in favor? 400. I don't know if we need to take a vote, but I accepted the agenda adjustment. Our public input portion of the program. It was scheduled to begin at 7 o'clock. I have heard that we may have some folks coming. So what I'd like to do is I'll open it, and as people arrive, we can allow them to speak, and we will at least keep it open past that time that it was originally slated for if there is no objection by the board. Excellent. So continuing along, we'll move into then our principal's report.
I'd like to once again thank Candy and Paula for all their efforts to put together the document. They have provided you the enrollment report with the breakdown of classes. We are very happy with the class sizes and staying within our educational specs, which is very exciting. We have had 17 new students move into Hollis and 3 into Hughes. We have had a very successful 4 days. The kids have been fantastic. You know, first I need to thank the bus company because they have done a great job working with the SAU office. We've only had a couple minor adjustments, which is really nice. We are off and running. To give you an example, we had all buses gone home today by 3:36. So we're only a couple minutes away from, I'll say, mid-season form. And that's really a credit to the kids and the staff for doing a great job. The custodians, as I've expressed earlier, have done yeoman's work. We always seem to have to push it right to the edge, so our new walls for the library spaces arrived the week before school. Lance and his crew, working with the construction company, got those all up and ready. And then a credit to our fabulous first grade teachers who whipped up their rooms, and you would have never known what it looked like 3 days before. Just tremendous, and it was such a welcoming environment for the kids. So that has been tremendous. Some different events for people at home. The September 9th, HPS will have their open house from 5:30 to 7. On the 10th, it's a professional development day. We typically don't have one in September, but as the board is aware, we have a new math and reading literacy program. So we have training coming in on that day to really give us a jump start into those programs. The 11th is Hughes Open House. Also on the 11th, we have Picture Day at HPS. Then from the 16th through the 27th, HPS and Hughes will have their fall Ames Web testing, and that gives the schools as well as their teachers a baseline for the year and a nice comparison to see if they've lost any knowledge over the summer or where they're actually starting from. The 27th is Hughes Picture Day, and then October 1st, we have an early release day, and then from the 2nd to the 4th, we'll be working closely with the Hollis Fire Department at Hughes for fire prevention activities. Right now in our buildings, all the teachers are working on building their classroom routines, as well as going through safety drills, fire drills, all of those type of things, so that students, immediately kind of start to understand where they're going, what are their points to gather, what happens when I'm the student who the alarm goes off and I'm in the hallway or in the bathroom, all those things that really could be nerve-wracking to many students. So that really is a brunt of what we've been doing over the last few days, and that goes very well. Hughes, the building is ready for the students. The bathroom stalls have been installed in all the boys' bathrooms. The gym floor was refinished. The interactive flat panels have been installed in 5 more spaces this summer. The parking lot has been repainted and curbs are clearly marked. New recess balls are ready and the playground area is in good shape, along with the track, which has been cleaned up and repacked down for a smoother feeling. The picture on the principal's report is the new main office space here. We're very excited with the new, what I call the bank teller window. So a parent, can just drop something off quickly, and no one has to come into the main building unless we know what their purpose is. So that's one of the big things from Homeland Security, is having that double-doored foyer, so the person is in the foyer until they're given permission to enter the school. So again, thank you to Lance and his crew for making that happen. The HPS, the new walls are looking great. The Learning Commons is ready to welcome students. And Mr. Bender and his team work hard to ensure a great opening to the building. It's clean, set up, and ready to go. For those of you who don't know, Mr. Bender is replacing Chuck Stoll, who retired after 30 years. We lost a lot of institutional knowledge, and Tom has just picked up and has been very well received at the primary school. And Paula provided an example of what the wall looks like. And if any of the board members would like to come in and see those, we'd be happy to show what they look like. That way, if you were to get questions, you can answer them from a more knowledgeable point of view. HPS is fully staffed to start the school year. They welcomed all staff and students back on the first day. They came back at Hughes to cheers, music, and much laughter, as well as what has become a tradition, the chalk painting and the, I'll call it the food truck. It's mainly ice cream at night, but it's really interesting because a tradition that started at the Hollis schools now has become a tradition at the co-op high school, where each of the students, as their senior year approaches, their parents chalk their parking space. So I had 2 staff members, in Lauren and Gina, who got the pleasure of doing that for their daughters as they start their senior year. And it's, we often forget that it really doesn't matter your age. Everybody likes to celebrate good things happening. Yeah. So our seniors have really embraced that tradition, and I think it's here to stay, quite frankly.
Next step is to make it be paint, so the drawings can stick around.
Yeah. So that is the principal's report. I can't stress enough just how welcoming the staff made it for the students. It's opening day's exciting. It's new clothes, it's new lunch boxes, it's the backpack. But for many students, it's also nerves and scary of the unknown. And seeing familiar faces and having teachers that are excited to welcome them and approach them and get to know them personally right away has been really wonderful. And if there's any parent who's out there and their child's still struggling, they need to let us know, because we can take some steps and do some things differently, because not every children adjust at the same pace as others. Super. And that's it for the principal's reports, unless there's any questions from the board.
Andy, I just wanted to clarify about the enrollment numbers. So in our August meeting, we were coming in a little bit under what was projected by NESDEC. And then when I look at the current enrollment breakout, we are up 17 students. So is that total, or is that, I mean, that's not just compared to last month?
No, that's the total of ins and outs.
Yeah.
You know, so, and then they break it down by grade level. And I don't think that's over in terms of people looking at some
Projected.
houses or waiting to close on their house.
I see.
So I think you'll see those numbers continue to fluctuate. It's usually around October, when we have to file with the state, that they really kind of start to settle down.
Because the NESDEC prediction for kindergarten is 100 students,
Yep.
and right now we only have 68, so we're sort of notably under.
Yep.
But we're 95 at 95 versus the projected of 75 for first grade. But we only had 5 more students added. So I guess I'm wondering, when is the NESDEC projection? When do they put out their projections?
They put it out in the fall.
Yeah.
I will tell you that kindergarten is always a roll of the dice
Yeah.
to me, because it's very dependent on move-ins and move-outs.
Yeah.
And if you notice, the last year's number was 75, and it ballooned with 20 new students. So you also have a lot of families who may take the extra year of private kindergarten for their family needs. Maybe they've been able to accommodate their daycare requests, because a lot of our children now go from, the morning until early evening pickup.
And to clarify for you, just in July, the enrollment report did have our total number of students as 370, and now it's showing 390. So we must have, there must have been a few ins and outs there to make it the plus 17, as opposed to what it appears to be is plus 20. But yeah, I mean, this is why we have to do the work we have to do.
Yeah, that was a good ask. Andy, I do have a quick question. We do have some stuff in the outline for resignations, nominations, and retirements and correspondence. Are there any that you have? They weren't on our basic agenda, but they're in our detailed one. Do you have anything we need to take?
No, Dawn will always have that in the detailed one, but we haven't had any changes since the August meeting where I told you about our new second grade teacher. And I don't anticipate anything unless it was for either a unexpected leave or a leave that would result maybe from somebody who was going to expand their family.
Gotcha. Do we need to make a motion to accept the resignation of our former member officially?
No, because that was still done.
Cool. I
Under
just
my
wanted to
watch.
make sure.
Yep.
Thank you.
The only
Thank
thing
you.
that should have in there, which is on the agenda, is the approval of the minutes from August.
Right.
Yeah, I think we should probably just clean that up. Can we make an agenda adjustment at this point? Would
Yep.
that be all right?
Yes.
I'll take a motion to amend the agenda so we can complete our approval of the minutes from our August 1st, 2024 meeting.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Excellent. All those in favor? Perfect, thank you. So I'll take a motion to accept as amended the approval of minutes. The following amendment was offered, page 6, line 10, delete B following would.
So moved.
Excellent. Second? Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of accepting the minutes as amended? 400. That felt like a really kludgy acceptance of minutes, so sorry about that. All right, we're now moving into our discussion portion of the evening with the retained fund balance memo.
You'll see that the retained fund balance appears under discussion and then under deliberations, because it will require a board vote. Kelly Seeley, our business manager, put together the memo for us. We are still finishing up the field work So the final number for the FY '24 budget is not finalized. That is not uncommon. It's actually very common. In May, we recommended a retained fund balance of $284,000 for FY '25, which is 2% of the net assessment. We are still estimating that this retained fund balance will still allow at least $200,000, likely more, to be returned to the taxpayers as a reduction in taxes. During the budget process, this is the minimum amount that we said we would return. If the board wanted to retain more to use towards the HPS front entry renovation or other enrollment expansions expenses, the board can retain up to $350,000. Assuming the board would like to move forward with $284,000 as the FY '25 retained fund balance, please request the following motion, which we would do during deliberations. Kelly always tries to provide the board with what we've been projecting, as well as what is the maximum. Our budget in Hollis is looking very stable as of right now. So it is totally up to the board which number you would like to retain. I don't want you to think that by only retaining the 284 that we would have any difficulty with our projections or what we're planning on doing. The only expense that will come up, and we'll talk about it tonight, is just the proposal for the architect and the traffic specialist to work with us. But I can believe I can find that in the operating budget. So when we get to deliberations, my recommendation would be the $284,000, because we also have the contingency fund, and we have the special ed trust fund. So you have three means of addressing anything that should come up. If it was a maintenance trust issue, you also have a small balance in the maintenance trust, but yet you do have a balance. And I'd be happy to answer any questions on that.
Do we need to make a motion before asking questions?
No, because it's part of the discussion. And then when we get to the deliberations, hopefully we've answered the questions and the board can just choose which number they'd like and move forward.
Okay, so there's this line here about if we'd like to retain more for the Hollis Primary School front entry renovation or other enrollment expansion expenses. So specifically the front entry renovation, what's the I know we have the SAFE grant, but to my knowledge, I mean, there's been, I don't know if there have been any architectural plans drawn up or anything. Where are we with that? Would more money be helpful in moving that along?
The SAFE grant for HPS was used on the windows and the doors.
Okay.
We talked about the film that makes it very, very difficult for somebody to get in. We have had, I'll say, discussions and not drawings, but I'll call renderings of what a front entrance might look like. But that was really completed as part of the last major bond project. And I'm not sure with the new enrollment piece if that will stay the same. So as much as we could put money aside for that, that may not even stay our main entrance.
Yeah.
Down in the future, depending on what the enrollment committee recommends to the board. That's why I'm comfortable with the 284, but Kelly is always going to give you the dollar amount to your legal limit, because there's been I believe in Hollis it's 2.5% that you can go up to, and that's where the 350 comes from.
So say for argument's sake, what if we approved the 350, but we didn't use it? We still could return that money to the taxpayers.
Absolutely, and just
But if we,
Go ahead.
I apologize, but if we don't approve that now, then we can't get it.
You wouldn't have the 350. That's correct. It would just be returned to the taxpayers when the final audit is done. It would be the 200,000 plus whatever, because Kelly says we will meet the minimum that we told them we would return was 200. So let's say it stayed at 200, it would be difference to 284, and the 350 would put us at like 264 or somewhere around there. And just because we do have new board members, the retained fund balance has to have a public hearing and has to have a board vote. So we don't get to use that money just because it's something we want to do. We have to come to you, it has to be a publicized public hearing, and it has to be approved on that basis. And it's something that we look at, because we would like to see the retained fund balance grow over time, because things are getting more expensive than they were. You know, to fix a boiler, we're learning is about $500,000. Now, granted, we have brand-new boilers here, still under warranty, so most of our major ticket items here are covered. So that 284 would go a long way, especially when you combine that with the contingency of 125. It's a good safeguard.
And I just want to clarify, because I don't want it misconstrued. So it's not something that we can grow over time like
Right.
the town can. So we want to, we might need the ability to grow the number that we retain, even though every year we have to give it back at the end of the next fiscal year. It's a percentage that we're allowed to retain, and the board decides anything up to that number. And so that's why it says you can retain up to about 350,000, because that's all that we're allowed to as a Hollis school district. But if you retain 284 or 350 and don't use it, the end of the next fiscal year, it just goes back to the taxpayers.
Okay.
So we don't get like a fund, slush fund basically.
So why wouldn't we want to just go ahead and authorize up to 350, considering the fact we have so many projects going on? You mentioned our septic system is 40 years old and might end up needing to be replaced. That is a consideration as we talk about, you know, what we might do in the enrollment committees, where building might take place, et cetera. You know, I'm just seeing that we have a lot of costs coming up, and we will eventually have to ask for more money. If there's money we don't necessarily have to ask for that is available to us, you know, if the architect and the engineer say, hey, that leach field is a perfect spot to build, we got to pull out that septic, and hey, we can put a brand new one right here, and that would be awesome. We could pay for that now for $50,000. I would love to be able to do that and not have to go through a whole bunch of rigmarole of getting through stuff. So I guess I just am wondering, would it behoove us to just go ahead and authorize the 350, and then if we don't need it, we don't need it? Am I off here, or?
No,
Okay.
that's just why it comes up every year, because each board has their own preference on what they'd like to do. And we have always worked off around the 2%, but we are just starting to see costs go up. So I can tell you from an administrative point of view, we would not be disappointed at 350. We don't have any intention of using it, so it would have to be really something that came out unexpectedly, or something to Ann's point that we had the opportunity to do, and it would be foolish not to take advantage of that opportunity.
My impression from town meetings is that people sometimes have some discomfort with the retained fund balance and feel like it is, this is not exactly the right word, but that people sometimes feel like, well, it's not clear to people exactly, you know, like where it's coming from, and like you have it, but then you give it back. And so I also sort of feel like, given that there is a sense that people feel like it's, like shady is not the right word, you know, that is hyperbolic, but people feel sort of uncomfortable with it a little bit, and I think it just doesn't always feel clear to people, you know, and that if we don't expect to need it, you know, and that people already feel understandably very attuned to taxes, you know what I mean, and expenses, that it sort of feels like if we don't expect to need it, that we maybe should not be like requesting additional funds that we don't expect to need. If we expect to be able to cover all of our expenses with other funds, you know, that why request more?
These are excellent points. I guess I'm just feeling like this is going to be an expensive project.
Sure.
And if there's a piece we can move on, we have the potential to move on before the town meeting to lay the groundwork, I think any opportunity where we can do that, I would love to have the funds available to be able to, because this is a multi-year project. Most of our children are not going to reap the benefits of the work that we're doing now, right? Why are we doing this work? Because we see there's a need for it and we care about all the kids, right? And the sooner we can get, you see in just the September enrollment numbers that you very astutely pointed out, there's a big change from just a month ago. That Hollis Primary School is in a dire situation. Just look at the numbers in Hollis Primary School versus Hughes. I mean, we've got 390 and 24 and a half classes. And they've got, 278 in 15 classes. I mean, that's insane. And that's a much bigger school, you know, and they're trying to cycle through a cafeteria at half this size, you know, that many more, you know, 100 and, you know, 18 more, I mean, 12 more kids through such a tiny space. Who knows how much more? Because when you look at our numbers in kindergarten at 68, our biggest jump is always from kindergarten to first grade for issues that we've discussed before. And if you're listening at home, you have people who are going to private kindergartners. You have kindergarten isn't required by law in New Hampshire. Some parents don't put their kids in until first grade. Next year, we could easily have another, you know, 30 to 40 kids. And so I'm just thinking, I don't know, maybe I'm being loosey-goosey with money here, and totally shut me down if I'm wrong, and I think it's good to push back. I'm just thinking, your point about the septic was an excellent point at our last enrollment committee meeting. None of us, I'm sure, knew that. We don't want to wait until there's a leak or until they're in like a dire situation. If there's an opportunity to do something and then start building on that land, especially if we're able to start a project before the summer that's not going to interfere with kids, I don't know what's possible. We don't know yet. I just feel there's so many unknowns. I'd rather have the money in the pocket. And if it doesn't have to be 350, you know, maybe there's another number that you would feel comfortable with, Andy, from your experience with septic systems, with renovations. I mean, that front office area really should get done. I would love to know, you know, in an ideal world, what would you like to see happen?
Well, can I ask before we say that?
Please.
Is there anything that we currently have planned to do with the RFP? Like, do we have plans for any of that money right now?
No.
Okay.
No, and we intentionally try not to. We don't want that to become part of our budget.
Yeah.
That's, you know, I'll say an emergency. The board should also note that if we had a true emergency, and I'll give you an example, it's probably 15, 20 years ago now, we had mold here at Hughes. We have the ability to call a special annual meeting and go before the town and say, this is our dilemma, this is what we need, and the townspeople can authorize it. So there are enough safety nets that if something, you know, really significant, we have the ability there. I think the piece for me is trying to get the retained fund balance to grow over time. So if 350 is too much, and you wanted to split the difference, I mean, I can live with 284, so I don't, because again, one of my pieces is this town has always supported education. The
Yes.
budget committee, we end up with a very good budget every year, so it's that balancing act. I don't want to alienate people by seeming like I don't want to give something that belongs to them.
Sure.
So if you went to just, you know, kind of, I'll just say split the difference, like, you know, 300. That gives us a little more cushion, you know, because now all of a sudden I'm at about $500,000 between there and the contingency fund. Because let's say tomorrow, probably the most likely thing that could happen is a child moves into our community and we can't service them here. And Lauren goes in search of a placement. That placement is probably going to be somewhere between $200,000 and $400,000. That won't be budgeted. So the first place we'd go is the special ed trust fund. That wouldn't be enough, you know? So that's really what you have to predict is it would be that type of scenario so that when either I sat here or Gina sat here and explained it to you, you'd be like, oh yeah, we have to do that. And we don't have any option legally but to fund that placement. So, but I also have always been conservative around the tax piece because the town has always shown up to support us. So when you think, I know we could have an expensive project coming up, but we've already done 3 proof of concepts in major renovations to our schools. And I mean, there was one year where it passed with every single person in the room, which is unheard of, you know? So I think we've built an element of trust with the community, with the budget committee, and if you wanted to split the difference or make a motion that you're comfortable, that's fine. If you wanted to stay at 284, that would be fine as well.
Andy, what was the retained fund balance total last fiscal? Do you remember off the top of your head?
It goes around 284.
Yeah, the 284.
It was still 284, so we've been maintaining,
Yeah.
that's what I thought, I just couldn't remember the exact
And
total.
the only reason it could grow and why it could go up to 350 now is because it's the percentage of the overall budget.
Right.
So we haven't raised it for, I think, I want to say at least 3 years, it's been 284. And that's why you see that gap now, all of a sudden, it could be 350. That's because our overall operating budget has gone up, so 2% or 2.5% of that is now increased.
If we
And
were
again, we
to
c-
genuinely split the difference, that would get us to about 316,000.
So when we get to deliberations, I mean, there's nothing wrong with making multiple motions until the group is satisfied with where we end up. Okay?
Rafi, did you have any questions during this session for Andy?
I think if we were talking about particulars with expected expenditures like enrollment related, would we mainly be trying to avoid using the retained fund balance for that kind of stuff
Yeah.
based on the way that usually which piles we're pulling from first?
Great question, great question. So all of a sudden, we had an explosion in enrollment, and I needed a teacher or paras for whatever reason. I would go to the contingency fund first. Then I would work with Kelly to see if we can find it in the operating budget. If it was related to special ed, we'd go to Laura and have a discussion about that. And then last resort is this retained fund balance. So like if I couldn't cover the $10,000 for the enrollment study, right, I would then come back and say, with the board's permission, go into the contingency. But I wouldn't do that until the spring, because it's really kind of my job of working with Kelly and Gina to get us through the year and maybe identify a place in the operating budget that we're a little under on, we didn't have as big an expense to do some project, and then pay through it that way.
Just to provide some more accurate information from last year, we did 1.5% of the net assessment, so we did 180,000. Kelly's for the 284 is 2%, so it is a slight increase over last year's retained fund balance percentage-wise, plus it also obviously the dollar amount. So just to
Okay.
give you the.
What was it? Say it again. Last year was
180, but it was 1.5% of the net assessment, whereas
This year
this
it's
is
2%.
2% was the 284, but
Yeah.
we could go all the way up to 2.5% legally.
Gotcha.
So
So
whatever
we're
you feel most
Just
comfortable
explain.
doing.
yeah, we've gone
difference.
up half a percentage
Okay.
point and up $100,000.
Yeah, and just to give you, we had the same discussion at the co-op board.
Yeah.
And they went to the 2% because they felt that was the easiest way to answer their constituents when asked. That we went from 1.5 to 2. We could have gone to 2.5. We wanted to make sure we give back as much of the tax dollars, but we do have a greater concern that things are getting more expensive.
Gotcha.
So sticking at a defined percent would be helpful because I think it's easier to answer the voters' question when you get asked.
Okay. That was helpful, thank you.
Excellent. Are we satisfied with this discussion point for now? And we'll revisit
Yes.
it during deliberations? Excellent. Andy, and probably you, Ann, enrollment committee update.
So we had a great meeting in August with the architect and engineer. And basically, I was very pleased to see that they had both done some preliminary work. They brought us some kind of, rough preliminary drawings. Engineer Steve has actually been to the site. He made some observations. He had some suggestions for, places where we could do some building. Of course, was all
Can you
just
define what the site is for those folks watching at home?
Hollis Primary School.
Okay, thank you.
Because he hadn't been to the property before, where of course Dave is very familiar with the property. So they were both very earnest, very willing to answer our questions. They made a great presentation. I can answer any questions that you all have, but the entire committee felt very comfortable by the end of the meeting, and the full committee basically expressed the support of this proposal. It is very reasonably priced. It is light on hours. It's about 47 to 48 hours worth of work. So they will give us a heads up if when we start to approach that number, so we can be aware, and then we would inform you, of course, the board, and that would require further authorization if we were going to continue to employ their hourly services for consulting. So I'm happy to answer any further questions if anyone has any.
So the master plan, right, it is making the plan. It's right, it's like the drawings and what we could do given the site that we're talking about building on. And so this is not approving any plan, it's approving them drawing a plan.
Yeah, so with this approval, Dave will be meeting with Mrs. Bickey and Ms. Sayer, the senior secretary, actually tomorrow, in fact, and be walking the space, talking about what kind of renovations would be helpful for his portion of renovating the current building, what kind of spaces that they need. That would be included in a master plan. Also included in the master plan would be options for sites to build upon. And that's where we brought up the possibility of the leach field, if we were to move the playground, move the leach field, which originally we thought, no, we can't do that, until Andy pointed out it's 40 years old. And so that might actually be very prudent if that's the best place to build. But they're going to be looking at, what land we have available, where can we actually build, and what would traffic patterns look like, parking spaces. We gave a full list of considerations. And so that ultimate, master plan that would be developed would be thick. This is just a very thin couple-page proposal. We're talking like maybe 100 pages, I'm not sure. But yeah, master plans are significant documents.
And is there a sense as part of the master plan, would they be creating multiple options? Like it could look like this, or like this, or like this, or are they sort of coming up with one definitive plan that they think is the best?
We would like to have options beforehand. I would assume that what would be happening is in that process, while we are presented with options, the committee will discuss what options are presented and have them do the full draw up of whatever everyone involved feels would be the best course of action. We wouldn't want 3 separate master plans for 3 separate options, but we'll discuss that of what is possible at our next meeting.
Gotcha.
And being that they're making the plans projected enrollment, is there some kind of like confidence interval, kind of like a spread of possible enrollment numbers that would make sense? Like, okay, well, this is the best number, so we think this is what a plan would entail based on that number.
So we're looking
Like
at
a
the
capacity question, essentially?
Yeah.
Well, it's to the point of capacity, so yes, we're going to be looking at projection numbers for the school, but I'm in conversations with Mark Ledoux, and we're going to be just finding out, look, they're the numbers in the print, but it is good. Unfortunately, Mike Levitt wasn't able to attend the last meeting, the committee, but also on the plan, so he will ideally be at our next meeting and be able to give us some background to that as well. As far as building that's happening, what's in the works, what is the town owned, et cetera.
Excellent. So during deliberations, you'll be asking us to accept this plan and allot the money for it?
Yes.
Andy, since we just were having a whole bunch of discussion about where money's coming from for different,
Flexible at this point, because it wouldn't be one set line item, because we didn't budget $10,000 for a plan study.
right? And is this, I'm not sure if you know this, Ann, is it something that we pay in full, or is it over time? And about how long will this take? I apologize if you said that and I missed it.
They gave us, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Andy, they gave us hourly rates, so that when we start to approach that threshold, so that we can plan for that accordingly.
What?
They know that by November, December, we have to have something concrete to start discussing, and then fine tuning that, so that if the board wanted to go,
So that, with this personally, any other discussion points here before we then move into our deliberative session?
We would expect that Windy Hill. And it's also important that if anybody is really, are public meetings and can be attended by the public and all that information. I move to authorize the expenditure of an amount up to $10,000 of the Hollis Primary School through Windy Hill Associates. Source of funding is the general operating budget.
Second?
Discussion.
I think this is an amount of money that's coming from the general operating budget, you know? The proposal itself is
Discussion points from you, Ann?
No, I think I put them here.
All right, seeing no further discussion, let's take a vote on the motion to authorize the expenditure. All those in favor? 400. It passes. Thank you very much. We look forward to hearing the results of that for our meeting, so we can hear
Yep.
about it a little bit at that point. Awesome. All right.
And yeah, I think your point that expenses and enrollment and dealing with enrollment is real, and I think your question.
I think it's also good that we're keeping in step with the co-op, if they're also doing 2%, so I guess we don't want to be greedy. So.
Yeah, I agree with the point of already going from 1.5 to 2 makes sense.
Yep, I feel the same. Any more discussion? Seeing none? All those in favor of accepting the motion to retain up to the sum of $284,000? 400. Thank you for the good discussion and detail. All right, we are moving on to our next deliberation item to see what action the board will take regarding GBCD, background investigation and criminal history records. This is our third reading of possible adoption. I'll accept a motion.
I move to accept the third reading and adopt policy GBCD, background investigation and criminal records check.
Second,
Second.
discussion.
So one of the notes from the board last time had been just correcting the lettering on 2 of the headings. That was the only note, and that change has been made.
And the only other change that was made by the committee was page 4 of the policy, number 6. There is the removal of the word check because it's already in the initials CHRC. So it's a redundant word.
Like ATM machine. I just dated myself right there. Did you get it? Excellent. Any other discussion on this one? Seeing none, all those in favor for third and adopt of GBCD background investigation? 400. Motion carries. Next up is to see what action the board will take regarding ACF, Food and Nutrition Services, anti-discrimination and civil rights complaints. This is our third reading and possible adoption. I'll accept a motion.
I move to amend number 1 on the second page by inserting the word calendar following 180, and then accept in the third reading and adopt policy ACF, Food and Nutrition Services, anti-discrimination and civil rights complaints as amended.
Second,
Second.
discussion.
So there had been a question from the last school board meeting about 180 days to make a complaint, and was it school days or calendar days? And so we were clarifying calendar days. There was also a formatting change made to give the Justice for All poster its own section, just for a consistency in formatting, and that was changed. There had been a question last meeting about what if you needed a waiver for more time to file your complaint? Should we put language in the policy about who you would maybe get that waiver from? But generally, there aren't waivers for something like this, and I think there is a feeling that 180 days is probably enough time to be able to make the complaint, so that was not language that was added.
Excellent, thank you for the detail. Discussion? We've definitely discussed this one at length over the last couple of readings. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor? 400. Thank you for your work on that one. We went back and forth a bit.
To be clear, I missed the last policy meeting because I had COVID, so Gina should get.
Can't take credit.
Gina popping in.
Was not at the meeting. Lauren went.
Lauren is really pulling a lot of weight.
today.
Here's for giving credit where credit
Well,
is due.
keep going.
Everybody else.
Oh, that's too funny. I'm hoping that we can, we'll move through a couple more deliberation points, and then I see we have a member of the public who has arrived, so I want to give you some space. We started it early because we had to amend our agenda, but we want to give you some time for that, so give us a couple moments and we'll get to that, okay? Thank you so much. All right, deliberation item number 5, to see what action the board will take regarding JI, student rights and responsibilities. This is a third reading and possible adoption. I'll take a motion.
I move to accept the third reading and adopt policy JI, student rights and responsibilities.
Second?
Second.
Discussion.
This was, right, student rights and responsibilities are just with some, we had talked about how this policy had already been in the student handbook as printed. And Lauren, maybe you can clarify this. There had been a question from last month, that should we change the title digitally? And it wouldn't match what was printed, or would that be confusing? And I wasn't actually sure what the rest of the folks
Yes,
decided
I
there.
mean, and it does reference the student rights and responsibilities. It's not exactly printed like this
Yeah.
in this year's handbook, but because it's already been distributed, we're gonna change it for next year, so Candy and Paula have that note. So they're gonna make it match entirely for next year.
Okay,
we're
but
noting
not
that
changing it
We're not
this
gonna
year.
change it this one.
So like right now, if you go online and you look for the student handbook, right at this moment, at least I could only find the 23-24 handbook.
We'll make sure that's updated on the website.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Oh, that's
I was
okay.
just gonna say,
That's
so when
okay.
the
I didn't
24,
realize
that wasn't meant to be a critique.
Yep.
So when the 24 goes up, will it have that language in it, like digitally? Because obviously we understand it's obviously not gonna be in the hard copy, but that was the question, was it like when it's digitally online, will it be
Yeah.
changed?
So, everyone signs off on it in the student registration, and when that goes out at the end of July through August. So we don't typically, once parents have signed off on something,
We don't change
we
it.
don't want to change it without kind of putting it out there, here's the new one, please sign off on it.
Gotcha,
Does that make sense?
okay, that makes sense.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, we can take a vote. All those in favor? 4-0-0. All right, our next one is to see what action the board will take regarding GBCD-R-RG1, criminal history records information, internal controls and procedures. This is the second reading, possible adoption.
Should we move to public input?
I have it marked. Keep going.
Okay,
Yep. We will get there in just a moment.
GBCDR, background investigation and criminal records checks?
Yes.
Okay. I move to accept the second reading and waive the third and adopt policy GBCDR, background investigation and criminal records history check, internal controls and procedures.
Second,
Second.
discussion.
There had been a question about just fixing 2 header letters, and that was fixed. And that had been the only note. And so given that, the policy committee wanted to waive the third reading and accept it now.
I actually don't see the change, at least on the copy that we were given. So it ends with B and C, where it should end with F and G. I think that's what Carol had brought up before.
Correct.
That's the only thing I see, is that it actually, at least in the copy we were given, that isn't changed.
Yeah, it could be the old copy.
Yeah, unless the wrong copy was put up.
Yeah, because in the one we had at policy, it was FG.
Okay, so it should be F and G.
Yeah, it'll be after the meeting. Cool.
That's all.
So that's it. Are you concerned about voting that in because of that not being visible on our copy, or?
I'm not concerned, I just didn't know if it was known that it wasn't
Gotcha.
actually
Okay.
changed, so.
Totally fine. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? 4-0-0. Number 7, to see what action the board will take regarding IHBA-R, Programs for Pupils with Disabilities, Section 504, Notice of Parent and Student Rights, second reading. I'll take a motion.
I move to accept the second reading of policy IHBAR, Programs for Pupils with Disabilities, Section 504, Notice of Parent and Student Rights.
Second?
Second.
Discussion.
Okay, so I have a couple little things. Sorry to nitpick, but, so if you go under dual eligibility, we start by quoting the title of New Hampshire Special Education Procedural Safeguards Handbook. We need an end quote there. Then, paragraph above number 1. So this is something I'm going to be bringing up throughout. So we tend to sometimes be inconsistent with saying parents and then parents/guardians or parents/legal guardians. I just feel like for consistency's sake, every time we encounter that, and I'm going to be annoying tonight, I'm sorry, and I'm going to keep pointing that out.
Not annoying. Consistency is
Just,
good.
like I said, just for consistency. So in that paragraph above number 1, you're going to see CFR Part 104 provides parents and/or students, it should say parents, legal guardians, and/or students, with the following rights. This next one, you're going to probably want to double check me on, but I don't know why I did this today. I must have been bored. So number 6, where
You're
we're
thorough,
quoting.
my friend, not bored.
Yeah, when we're quoting 34 CFR 104.34, I actually believe that's supposed to be .35. Because .34 has to do with the environment and 3.5 has to do with evaluation and placement. Unless I'm misreading.
I'm gonna double check it. This
Please double
was
check me.
pulled- Yep.
Okay. And that's it. And I guess the other question I had, is this a new policy?
So this is a
It's the
regulation.
oh, sorry.
We typically do not adopt regulations, but our legal counsel has advised us for some of these to start doing so that it can be, so we can just provide clarity to parents as to our processes. This is really just a procedural document.
Gotcha. Okay. That was all my only question, and those were my only notes.
I just had a big picture question to make sure I understood how they relate to each other in terms of dual eligibility. Section 504 is is likely to be more general since it's the anti-discrimination, and IDEA, you would be narrowing down the group that would qualify for it. Is there ever a possibility where you would qualify for IDEA but not 504?
Sort of. So in the individualized education plans that fall under IDEA, there are pieces of that plan that encompass Section 504. However, there are some disabilities or medical conditions where you would have a Section 504 plan under OCR plus an IEP under IDEA, so it really is kind of very student-specific. But you are correct, the Section 504 criteria is a broader umbrella that encompasses everyone under IDEA, as well as some other conditions and students. Does that make sense?
Yes, that helps a lot. Thank you.
Gina, is there a reason that our legal counsel says that some regulations we should make policy? Is there like a certain?
They're not considered policy, they're just regulations that are adopted similarly to policies. And I think, so providing parents better knowledge of rights, it is one of them because it sort of would take away the step of a parent kind of going straight to the state. These are your rights. We're here to help you along the way, and if we have a disagreement, this is how you proceed.
Right, and this is the exact procedural safeguards under Section 504 that is distributed to families and students when they are referred for Section 504 eligibility.
So they are handed it out, but at a meeting, whereas this is just provided to everyone.
So they can see it before.
Visibility of process and stuff.
Yeah. If you recall, we had a big discussion a year ago with a prior board member just about bringing greater visibility to some of our processes. We're not trying to hide anything, but this is who to contact. If you have a concern, this is how you go about it. So.
Yep, I do remember. It was a good discussion.
And you are correct, this is going to be .35.
Good catch, Jen.
Good eye. Yeah. All right. Any other discussion on this one tonight? All right, seeing none, all those in favor of accepting the second reading? 400. Okay. At this time, I'm going to take a pause, about halfway through our deliberative items, because I do want to honor our time frame for public input. I do ask that any members of the public who are going to come to the microphone state their full name and address clearly. And you can speak for up to 3 minutes, and we ask you to kind of keep it as close to the agenda items as possible. You're welcome up. So come on up at your leisure. And talk a little louder, because these fans make it hard for us to hear you. The mic is just for the recording.
Okay. Okay. My name is Brianna Getman. I'm at 208 Silver Lake Road in Hollis. So I'm here, well, first of all, I would like to take a second to thank Jess because I emailed you really out of desperation right before school started about a subject that really isn't talked about very much, but unfortunately it's very much a part of HPS currently and was last year, and that is lice. Before school even started this year, there was a lice outbreak in my daughter's friend group, and I know it even traveled into the siblings of my daughter's lice group, or excuse me, friend group. Pretty much. And last year, the end of the year, my daughter got lice twice. And I just quickly want to explain what happened when she got lice. I immediately notified her teacher requesting that she just send an email anonymously saying, someone in the class has lice, please check your kiddos. She immediately called me and said, it was very clear that she had been told she cannot do that. So I then brought my daughter to a lice clinic in Nashua. They did a great job. I called the school nurse the following day and said, listen, what do I need to do? My kiddo's lice-free, do you need to check her? She then said that there was she said there was no policy and that it's discriminatory to check her and there was no protocol moving forward with lice. So I was a little frustrated this summer when school was about to start and I realized that there is a lice policy. It just wasn't put into practice by the nurse last year. This is a great year to set a new precedent. I know that there is a new nurse, and there is a policy that was put into place in 2019, right before the pandemic. And basically, I'm just asking for the policy to be put into practice. I do feel there are some amendments that need to happen in the current policy, but for just the nurse and all of the teachers to be made aware that they can notify parents and they should per the policy that's currently in place. The lice clinic that my family unfortunately uses quite often offers a free program for all schools to register, and they send a representative to the school to talk to the teachers, the nurses, even parents, and it's free. And they have pamphlets that they can provide the school, and then also teachers and the school nurse get free treatments at these lice clinics. And there are 3 in our area. There's one in Concord, one in Nashua, and one in Hampstead. I've visited 2, and they're all wonderful. And yeah, so I just hope my kiddos don't have, I have 2 daughters in school this year, HPS, so my chances have doubled. So we went twice last year, 3 total this year. I don't want to have to go 6 times or more. But thank you very much for your time.
Yeah.
And I'll be at the next policy meeting. Thank you so much for facilitating that.
Yeah,
So thank you.
fantastic. Thank you so much for coming and speaking tonight.
There is a suggested update to the policy anyway, so we had moved it and put it on our agenda for our next meeting.
Awesome, thank you for that quick action. And we will keep fingers crossed that you have fewer visits to the clinic this year.
Yeah. It's brutal.
Membership there. Really, it's not something.
I do too. Our kids are friends.
The lice group,
It's part of the lice group.
that was the best.
Girls are up, we're spraying them.
The rosemary thing, like,
Yes,
Yep.
and even just, I was the room parent last year, so I had everyone's emails, so I emailed them myself, and everyone was so appreciative that I did that. It wasn't like, oh, gross, your kiddo has lice. It's like, they were very much thankful that I wasn't doing that.
well, we appreciate that you felt comfortable to reach out to the board members. It is a great move, and with Jessica being on our policy committee, for those of you at home who don't realize that, if you do have policy questions, you can reach out. And that way, she can let you know if there are upcoming updates,
And
as you
also,
just
we
mentioned.
updated it, we moved it up to this agenda because you had brought it up. You know what I mean? So you bringing it up made a difference.
Awesome, well, thank you again.
Nice job, Jess.
All right, we're gonna pop back into our deliberative session. We are on number 8, to see what action the board will take regarding AC non-discrimination, first read. I'll take a motion.
I have to find myself back in the agenda. So if someone else, oh,
That
here we
one.
go. I motion to accept the first reading of policy ACAA, harassment of students, as presented.
Oh,
did I
AC,
skip
different
one?
one. Yep, AC non-discrimination.
Excuse me,
This
thank
one.
you.
Yep, sorry.
I motion that we accept the first reading of policy AC, non-discrimination, equal opportunity and affirmative action, as presented.
Second.
Second.
Okay. Discussion.
So as you may or may not remember, last September, we brought forward a bunch of policies that we had to do a first read and then a second read and adopt. AC, ACAA, and ACAB, and they were based on Title IX regulations that went into place. And I kind of warned you that, guess what, they're all going to change. We're going to have to do this again. So they've changed. This represents all the new legal changes. But like I said, I apologize for not attending the last policy meeting. But what I want to say is that I did notice just now that in section E, we struck through like who is the human rights officer for students in our district and the Title IX coordinator, et cetera, et cetera. I'd like to put those back for second read just because I really want to make sure everyone's very clear as to who the appropriate people are to contact with any concerns. So I just think it adds clarity. But other than that, everything is really straight from our legal requirements for Title IX. And we have before you our Title IX officer. So if you have any questions, she's had hours and hours and hours of training. So she can answer much better than I can.
Excellent. So, Gina, just to be clear, on this in section E, you want to unstrike the first.
And we can bring that for
Four?
you.
Is that what you're-
We can
okay.
bring that back
Yeah,
for
add
second
policy.
reading. I'm just kind of
Perfect.
giving you a heads up that I noticed it now, but I'd like to bring it back just so we can make sure we're extra clear for everybody.
Perfect. Thank you.
And it's going to be condensed because we are putting all of them under my umbrella. So it's going to be just Director of Student Services for all of those top 4 or 5, et cetera.
Got it.
I'm doing both.
Discussion or questions for Lauren or others? This is language coming just straight from.
Yeah,
From legal counsel.
From legal counsel.
okay. From legal counsel or from the school
From
board
our-
association?
Our
From
legal
ours?
counsel, yeah.
Oh, okay.
School Board Association has a different policy. It covers the same laws and interpretations, but at the end of the day, it's our legal counsel who represents us, so we want to make sure we're in lockstep with what they'd like us to have in place.
Did council say why changing to equal opportunity and affirmative action? Did anybody clarify why that phrase in particular?
I don't think they
It
did.
was kind of part of the beginning, but it was equal opportunity employment. Are you asking about the affirmative action ad?
Specifically, yeah.
Okay. So the
I was just
title.
curious.
The title.
Yeah, I was
We
just
can find
curious.
out, yeah.
I know that for some people, I'm not saying I'm one, but some people, that phrase is a trigger.
Yep,
Um,
it's a good question.
and, you know, just curious if we're trying to make things that are, you know, easier for the layman, you know, and just everybody in the community. I'm just curious why that changed. I don't have a feeling, I'm just curious why.
Sure, we will get that information for you.
Thank you.
Yep.
And just to add my own little editor note, non-dash discrimination in the title, it just lost its dash when you rewrote the title. Well, not you. When the title was rewritten, it lost its dash.
Yeah, thank you.
That's good. So, and one other just question, and obviously we'll put it where it needs to be, but all of those, that whole area under E, does it have am I missing its special area in the rest of the thing? Is that just going to mention who it is in that paragraph about the school district's designated and authorized Title IX coordinator?
Yeah. Yep, exactly.
Okay, it'll just mention the title of Director of Student Services. Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure I was seeing where it would go. Any other questions or discussion on AC?
Yeah, I had one question on when the areas of discrimination are listed out for school employees and then students. I don't know if there's a page number. But next to race, for school employees, there's no parenthesis, and then next to students, there's the parenthesis regarding hair, and so I was just curious why the difference there.
It's the first bullet under each
Yeah.
of those.
Yeah. I will find out the actual legal reason, but I think that what our attorneys are kind of listing in here are things that are coming up in recent events, recent incidents that they're seeing, and so, I think and hair is a new piece of the policy that it didn't used to occur. I don't know why it's not on the employee, I'll find out, but it didn't used to kind of include hair, but now they've made it a point to include hair. So I'm not sure if that was purely under students, so I'll find that out for us, or if it does apply to the adults as well.
I see a couple of other bullet
Yep.
points, good call out, Raf, where school employees have age and genetic information,
Yeah, I had a question about that.
and the school, the students section does not. So I think just the overall question would be why the differences between the two lists, when really those things could apply to both
Yep.
parties, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think age refers to older, elder, and that's why
Oh,
that's
I
not
know.
under the student, but as far as the genetic information, I'll find that out.
Okay.
Could we also get a clarification on what exactly is meant by genetic information?
That's what I was going to say, I need to find out as well.
Okay.
'cause
All
I-
right,
yeah,
thank you, thank you.
yeah.
Any other final questions or discussion on policy AC before we vote? Seeing none, all those in favor of accepting the first reading? 400. We look forward to seeing the next batch.
I'm very glad you're working. There's plenty more to come.
Oh, I know. Now to number 9, to see what action the board will take regarding ACAA, harassment of students, first read.
I move to accept the first reading of policy ACAA, harassment of students, as presented.
Second,
Second.
Raf. Discussion. It's basically a call out of the student section of the previous policy. Okay. But just with a little extra information.
I was wondering if under C, excuse me, if there could be clarification of who are the confidential employees?
Oh, good question.
You want to go?
You can, but which C are you talking about? There's a few.
Reports and complaints of harassment.
Page 2,
The-
bottom
the-
of
the
page
main
2.
C.
Thank you, sorry.
So
No, you're good.
I will share that we don't have any confidential employees.
Correct.
And we're not designated anyone here in the school district as a confidential employee. And so we went through, in our leadership retreat, we had some legal training with our attorneys, and it was 3 days, but anyway, one day was really focused on this, and we really had a better understanding of what this means. So we are going to remove the information in the parentheses because we don't employ anyone designated as such.
And are we going to add in this section also who the Human Rights HRO and Title IX Coordinator title is, or are we only leaving that up in the AC master policy that this rolls to? In case that title of the person changes.
We probably should include that in the policy, as that's part of our new training as well for all staff.
I have a question too.
Obviously the same question about including any other, the changes, because on this one I'm seeing the bullet point about race does not include the breakout about hair, as it does in policy AC. So I would appreciate those bullet points
For
being
consistency,
identical.
yeah.
Yes. And I think that's gonna be the case in our next one as well for whatever the answer is on AC. Sure. Drizzle it down.
And that's why we do multiple reads. So we can talk through these.
That's right. Any other discussion or questions for the team on this particular policy, ACAA? That's all. Seeing none, we can take a vote on accepting the first reading of ACAA. All those in favor? 0-0. Next, see what action the board will take regarding ACAB, harassment of school employees, first reading. I'll take a motion.
I move to accept the first reading of policy ACAB, harassment of school employees as presented.
Second,
Second.
discussion.
So this is just the policy specific for school employees. We will make sure that the bulleted lists match when we bring it forward for second read.
This is just to understand the rationale. So if you go to capital B, sexual harassment number 2, C, such conduct has the purpose or effect of, there was a switch from unreasonably to substantially interfering. It was just an interesting nuance, and I was just curious, is there, what's the rationale?
It's coming directly out of the new regulations.
I'm sorry,
It's
the new-
coming directly out of the new regulations. So under the new, yep, so the
Okay.
updated, that's the language that they're using now. And what we're looking at, with the unreasonably versus reasonably, is that anything that can be deemed reasonably considered potential sexual discrimination is to be reported. So that's why they're taking out the word unreasonably, because they're actually not even requiring it to be, it definitely happened. If you have a reasonable suspicion, it's going to be reported as a potential sex discrimination. The substantially has always been included in different parts, but they've kind of cleaned up that language, and now they're putting it in a more targeted approach.
Thank you.
I just wanted to make a quick note that in header C, reports and complaints of harassment, we obviously struck out the parts of sexual harassment because it has its own section. That first line of that says they have been harassed or sexually harassed is strongly encouraged to make a report. I think we need to take that sexual harassment out there because it's under not the sexual harassment section. And I don't see anything in the sexual harassment section that talks about reporting. Or change the title of C to be reports and complaints of harassment or sexual harassment, and that is the reporting section.
I agree.
I agree.
There are a couple mentions, obviously, in those two paragraphs of sexual harassment, and then obviously the other, double checking the policies to make sure that they go along with that. But I would just make sure that it's consistent, so thank you. Any other discussion on ACAB?
That's good.
I actually have one more. Then, if it is discussing sexual harassment, why is that not part of the title of the policy anymore? Are they rolling it in as a type of harassment, so they're using it as a blanket term?
Yes, and they're also kind of dividing up, you'll see, are we bringing the R?
Nope.
The regulations?
Not
No, not tonight. So you'll see at a future meeting.
Okay.
Regulations for harassment and sexual harassment, and they are divided up into two separate regulations. So they wanted to make it clear in the policy, in the umbrella policies, that yep, it's harassment, but we're keeping sexual harassment separate from all other types of harassment and discrimination, because the regulations are going to define that sexual harassment has its own, and then all the other forms of harassment have one.
Got it.
So that's why they're dividing it up.
Sexual harassment becomes
Title IX, right. The other ones are
and
Title
so
VII.
We actually did save you another 4 regulations.
Yes. We did.
But we would have loved so many more tonight. That would have
like
been
us
just
on
a
a roll.
great big old harassment
Yes.
party.
We didn't want to give you everything in one meeting. We wanted to spread it out, keep it going.
Keep the joy coming, yes.
Do you expect that those will come in October then?
The regulations will be here in October, yes.
Perfect,
Okay.
thank you.
And those are really nice and short.
It's a long one.
They are long. I apologize.
It's a lot of work.
All right, any other discussion on ACAB? Seeing none, we can take a vote. All those in favor of accepting the first reading of policy ACAB? 4-0-0. Thank keep it rolling. To see what action the board will take regarding ILD, educational questionnaires, surveys, and research. First reading. I'll accept a motion.
I move to accept the first reading of policy ILD, educational questionnaires, surveys, and research.
Second?
Second.
We're on a roll, Rafi. Discussion.
So I actually had some questions about this one that Gina, I think maybe you are the person for. This policy,
I couldn't.
it stands out to me as reading sort of differently than some of our other policies, you know? And some of the language in here feels a little hyperbolic to me, you know, in ways that our policies really do not. Like, so the one that stands out to me first, right? Like, I am a mental health therapist, and so point number 2 here. First of all, this is like formatted a little differently, but anyway, point number 2, that mental and physiological problems potentially embarrassing to the student or family. Like, of course, no one is required to be disclosing mental or physiological problems, but also I would never, psychological. I also would never describe them as embarrassing. You know what I mean? And so that language stands out to me. I don't think this is a thing that is super relevant because I don't think we're sending out a lot of third-party surveys to students.
Yep, so I will share that, so ILD, and I to be honest, I wasn't at the meeting, so
Yep.
I'm not sure if this was pulled from School Board Association, but this actually is, you're right, we don't do third-party surveys that often, rarely in the Hall School District. It becomes more of an issue when you go to the co-op and they start doing a youth risk behavior survey.
And they
but
start doing?
a youth risk behavior survey,
Yep.
and there's question about, you know, whether or not we continue that for our high school students. However, this, the non-educational survey becomes interpreted differently when we maybe send a Google form to our students about what is your favorite ice cream? What makes you happy? Those kinds of questions that are probably intended with all the best intentions. But unfortunately, it's a non-educational survey that is required we are required for notification to families, provide the questions ahead of time, give them notice, and it's an opt-in situation. Seems so innocent, but with depending on how you interpret the law. So we've been just making sure that we're adhering to that. And I'm curious if, and I don't have my laptop just died, but I don't have the information at the top of my head, if ILD is now a required policy, whereas prior it was recommended. It is the law, so we've been following it all along, and we've been providing information and education to our teachers about this. Like I said, I'm not sure if this is newly required as part of the spring update for policies.
Here it's defining survey as any organized gathering of data or information intended for analysis and aggregation. So to me, they keep talking about third parties, so to me it sounds like what you just described, though, that a teacher might give wouldn't fall under this. Am I misunderstanding what you were saying, or what this is written here? It sounds to me like that actually wouldn't be considered a survey by this definition.
So the courts have interpreted differently, and so we really just need to have a strict interpretation of what a survey is. For example, you can understand how if you are in AP statistics, which we don't offer here, but let's say we're in AP statistics and students need to collect data and analyze it, and maybe it's on favorite ice cream or favorite music, favorite songs, etc. Very innocent, yet at the same time it is a non-academic survey, and we're not allowed to collect that information.
Okay.
And so it's that balancing act between providing an educational opportunity that we can collect data and use it, but also what do we do with that information once we've collected it? Is it identifying our students coerced into answering these questions? And I agree that potentially embarrassing is an interesting choice of words, and so we'll definitely take a look at this more carefully at our next policy meeting.
I think too, like, I think maybe getting a clear definition, and if we don't put the definition in the policy, but just understanding sexual behavior and attitudes, what are we defining that as? Number 4, not asking that people be identifying illegal, antisocial, self-incriminating, and demeaning behavior. Like demeaning feels like that could be very broad, you know? And then also, critical appraisals of other individuals with whom respondents have close family relationships. This is
Yeah, I'd love to get a little more data about where the language came from
We
on this
can,
one.
yeah, we can actually,
Sorry, I didn't mean to
No.
comment
if you're
on
not
it. I think it's just-
comfortable
it's
moving forward
theme.
with the first read, we can also table this
Yeah.
until the next one. And then I can do a little bit more research into where the language came from.
Sure, yeah.
And then discuss it more.
Just as an aside, under school district approval, it does mention Brookline School District, because I'm assuming this is going for all of us. And I have a question of what the local education authority means.
That's LEA, that's just us as a school district.
Okay,
We're
I've
the
never
local
heard you guys
yeah.
referred to as LEAs
Yeah.
before.
In
so,
our
okay.
special education world, we are LEA entities, and the administrators are called LEA representatives and
Okay,
those pieces.
gotcha. Thank you for that clarification. Sure. All right, so,
I'm just gonna put out there, I had a few things that I actually already emailed to Jess, because I felt like they were getting a little, it was just gonna be kind of annoying, because there was some grammar and punctuation and things like that. So she has that.
Yep.
And she can bring that to the next policy meeting.
perfect. Any other discussion on this one? So, Gina brought up, I think it was Gina that said this, that if we want to table this rather than accept a first reading, we have the option to do so, but the motion on the table is to accept the first reading. Happy to take that vote, or Jessica, you were the one who made the motion, would you prefer to amend the motion to table? How would you like to proceed being the motion maker?
What's the procedural significance of tabling versus passing the motion? Like if we pass the motion, is it definitely coming up next meeting?
No.
So it doesn't necessarily.
No, but
doesn't
if you
have
don't
to come-
feel, so this is a policy we don't have right now.
Yeah,
So if you don't feel comfortable yet bringing it forward because there's so many questions.
Yeah.
Then maybe we just table it and then we have further discussion. But there's really, I guess that just takes away, it doesn't take away the history, but it takes away a read.
I'd recommend just withdrawing the motion,
great.
not touching it, moving on to the next one, and then when it comes back, it'll come back as first reading.
Okay, just so I understand, Andy, what's the procedural difference of withdrawing my motion versus tabling my motion, or tabling the motion?
Tabling means we couldn't discuss it until it was taken off the floor, so somebody would have to make a motion to bring it back on the table. By withdrawing your motion, it means it just we didn't have the discussion.
Does it get documented in notes?
Gets
In the
documented in the
minutes,
minutes.
yeah. In the minutes,
Yeah, it's
excuse
all
me, yeah.
captured in the minutes.
Great, yeah.
So, I mean, from a procedural point of view, they're almost identical.
Okay,
So it really wouldn't matter which option you choose. I think sometimes just withdrawing the motion means we're starting all over.
yeah,
And that sends an easier message than maybe tabling.
okay, great. I would like to withdraw my motion.
Do we need to take any kind of action on her
Nope.
withdrawal? I didn't think so, just wanted to make sure. Thank you, it was nice seeing business with you. Moving on to the next. To see what action the board will take regarding JJJ, access to public school programs by non-public students, first read. I'll take a motion.
I move to amend in the first sentence by deleting "do" before enrolled, and then accept the first reading of policy JJJ, access to public school programs by non-public students as amended.
Second.
Thank you, Ralph. Jumped in. I like it. Discussion.
Just another parent/guardian note in letter A. Parent/guardian permission as opposed to parent permission. And I had a question, also in section A, the last paragraph. Why is there a parentheses and 2 asterisks before JJA-R?
So that's an error. That's a note to us to check if we have that regulation.
Okay,
And so you'll see it come back as a period after the word appeal.
okay.
The parentheses situation in the second paragraph of A,
Yep.
with NHIA being in parentheses inside, can we do one bracket on the outside and friends inside, please? Just for clarification, because I got lost when I was reading it. Thought, where's the, hold on,
Yeah.
everything's in parentheses.
I am a fan of the bracket.
Yes, me too.
Under B, in the paragraph that begins with request, so the last paragraph under capital B, there's just a space that needs to be made. It's at the beginning of the line on the left-hand side, second from the bottom, the student services director. There just needs to be a space between the and student services.
Where is that?
Wait,
in?
say that one more time?
So the paragraph.
Second to last line, it
Yeah.
says the student services director.
And
together.
where is that? I'm sorry.
Right here.
And can we make it director
Yeah.
of student services?
see.
We're also going to flip-flop that, just to be consistent with all the other policies.
Well, I was gonna say flip-flop that, and I don't
the
think
name
we've
out.
traditionally put names in
we
there
don't need to
either.
put
That was my
We just put
question as
titles.
well.
So,
Yes.
yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
Not that you're going anywhere, but
That's
that's
fine. It should just be
Yeah,
director of
just 'cause
student
we don't do
services.
We're just gonna print it right into the
Yes.
policy, so you're stuck.
And then, and again, numbers 2 through 4 under E, same thing, parents, guardians. Just for consistency. And that's all I got. And this is new to Hollis, again?
This
is another
is-
one from legal?
So this is new, required by law. We certainly had policies relative to access. It was more
Yes, we
focused on access to curriculum by
Yeah.
public students, and so they're providing requirements that enhance what we're required to provide to non-public school students.
Okay, thank you.
It mentions under B, JJJ-R, does that actually exist, or is
It does
that
not.
kind of the other one?
That's the other one, and so
Okay.
that will just be recording
Got
consistent
it.
with procedures.
Perfect, thank you.
Yep. Thank you for putting that up.
For something like HPS, what would count as like curricular course, or is it kind of not really?
Yep, so we have some students that come just for music class, so they come once a week, or just for environmental science.
I see.
A lot of different kind of sort of handpicked
Field
what
trips,
we provide.
different things.
Yeah.
Under D, 2 and 3, it mentions JJA as well. I don't know if you want to
Thank
take
you.
a peek
Yeah.
at that one. Just noticed those as
Yep.
we were going by.
We potentially have JJA, or potentially is coming forward. Not today, I don't think, but in future. So we'll take a look at that and see if it's
Awesome. All right, any other discussion on JJJ? Seeing none, all those in favor of accepting the amended first reading?
Thank you.
0. Thank you. Next up, to see what action the board will take regarding JICD, student discipline and due process, first reading. I'll take a motion.
I move to accept the first reading of policy JICD, student discipline and due process.
Second,
Second.
discussion.
I have a lot of questions about this policy, and I don't want to monopolize the conversation. So I'm going to start with one that's just very simple. No, actually, it's not simple, but it really struck me. Under numbers 1, 2, and 3, these are very clearly stated as not appealable. I'm wondering what is the rationale behind that, because that struck me as unusual.
Which are removal from the classroom, restriction from school activities, and detention. But those are not appealable.
The 3 under
Disciplines.
B. B, 1, 2, 3. And it even says temporary reassignment does not mention that it's
No, that is appealable.
in probation.
So I would start with the removal from the classroom. So that's an in-the-moment removal. There's no opportunity to appeal because it's already happened. So it's to ensure the safety of all members of the class. So that's, in my mind, that's a clearer one. Like something occurs, a student is removed, let's say they go to the principal's office or whatever, there's no going back in time.
There is no going back in time. However, if as a parent, I felt that that was an inappropriate consequence given to my child, I would imagine I should be able to appeal to the principal and say, I don't feel that was an appropriate consequence given my information about the situation. I want to have a conference. To me, this statement could make a parent think they're not able to ask those questions.
I think if, when I think of an appeal, it's trying to get the decision reversed, and you can't reverse the decision if it's happened. I do understand what you're saying with possibly making someone just not have a conversation.
Yeah.
Would it be?
I'm just wondering, is
Would
it
it-
even necessary to be put in then?
I think you have to, because if there are other parts in here that are appealable, they should be defined as such, in my opinion. But I think, being able to be like, no, you can't appeal detention, you can't appeal restriction from activities, things like that.
Well,
I don't know.
I would say, when we get to 4 and 5, which are temporary reassignment and probation, it doesn't actually say that it can be appealed. And
Right,
yet it
that's what I
can
was
be.
just saying.
So, but-
you gotta mention it for all of them to be clear.
Yeah, so if we're not saying that can be, I don't see why we need to say that can't be. And when we look at the others, so restriction from school activities and detention, I guess part of my concern with this policy is there's no differentiation stated in this policy about how this is done differently based on age. The only time age is mentioned in this document is when it comes to expulsion. And this is a district that covers pre-K through 6th grade. So when I was reading this, I was thinking, as someone with a history of secondary education, middle and high school, these things seem appropriate to me as like progressive discipline. But when we're thinking of this technically covers 4, 5, and 6-year-olds. I think like detention is developmentally inappropriate at that age, but there's no distinction saying that a child that age can't be assigned 3 hours on a Saturday. And as a parent, I'm reading, I can't appeal that if a principal were to put that. Now, we could say, I believe that our current staff would never do such a thing. I believe that our current staff would be compassionate and more corrective and be thoughtful in that, but this document potentially outlives our current staff. And, what if we got some sort of a nightmare person in here? By the time a parent consults this policy, because nobody's going out and looking for this policy unless they feel they have to. Emotions are high, tensions are high, a problem has existed. If I, as a parent, already worked up for whatever reason, encounter this language 3 times under things that could potentially be developmentally inappropriate, that gives the school a lot of problems and potential for litigation.
I'm gonna jump in for a quick second.
Sure.
I appreciate everything you're saying. This was the one policy we brought forth so far that didn't get history given to it at the beginning. Is this one that was just mandated that we have to add? And where does the language come from?
And so we have JIC. This comes from School Board Association. We have JIC. This is, so we provide due process. We have student discipline. We have behaviors identified in the student handbook. And that identifies our process at HPS based on the age of the student in our process at Hughes. Unfortunately, we are legally required to have all of these possibilities identified and defined for everybody. There's a very long section on expulsion.
Yes.
That is not something that we see. It's something that takes years. It's just like, it's really not part of any of our districts, but we are legally required to have it in policy.
So if they pass something, they're thinking also of districts that have a school board that services pre-K through 12.
Pre-K to 12, yep.
Yeah.
And there's some other legally required policies that the policy committee wasn't quite ready to put forward for similar reasons. Doesn't seem appropriate for K to 6. Yeah. And we're seeing that more. We're seeing legal requirements to have policies that just don't make sense for all districts. If you recall, there was that athletics one that we did a couple years ago. We don't
Yes.
have athletics, but it's required for any, for grades 4 and up. So we have to have the policy, but we don't have athletics here.
So
yeah.
for this one, this is just the straight language that they first gave to use. It hasn't been reviewed by our legal counsel or anybody else that, or we just really, like, what, I don't see that you guys made any changes from the suggested on this first read.
No, so when we bring
for that?
something forward for our first time, we don't do underlines because the whole thing is new.
Okay.
When we do a strike through and underline, we're just identifying changes from what is currently in place. So this,
Gotcha.
like I said, I'm sorry, I wasn't at the meeting, so I'm not sure of all the conversation that took place.
I could share some of the conversation that took place. So when we, went through this, and again, it's given, like Gina said, to us directly from the law, but we had an extensive conversation about the handbook. And it's really the handbook that drives that kind of progressive discipline piece and what the administration's approach is to behavior. And and I'm going through it now because I was trying to refresh my memory of what Candy and Paula were sharing too. So, they didn't even feel that this was that bad or kind of strict, because again, it's the handbook and the policy does refer to our own code of conducts and those pieces. So if we go back to the handbook and that's what we're following, these are kind of overarching policy pieces, but this is what we follow from our own method and point of view on discipline, which is actually very positive and restorative and progressive. It's not this per se. It's very developmental.
If those two things conflict, which one prevails?
But they don't conflict necessarily.
Okay.
Even in kind of looking, and we could have deeper conversations, but even in
Oh,
reading them
it's
through.
it's been a bit since I've read the code
Yeah.
of conduct for the primary school, so I
Right. It's the same. It's the same. It's
I'll
the same
be
handbook.
honest.
respect yourself,
Yes,
respect
yes.
us.
Well, I went to the handbook
Right.
and I looked at this, and I'm going to be honest. So I'm a very involved parent, and it's my second year. It's my second year. It's my third year.
Year.
I'm going into my third year at the school. I've never bothered reading the discipline policy because I'm like, oh, my kids are fine. And because you know why? Because that's just what we do. And so as parents, and so when do you read these policies? You read them when a problem happens.
Yeah.
Right? And so I think that this kind of might propel forward a bigger conversation about the handbook. I look at this, it is incredibly text heavy.
Yep.
Whenever I have worked anywhere, particularly I would say the last two schools I worked at, one in which I was a part of creating this, like when the entire school had a progressive discipline policy that was very visible and very transparent and very simple, like 5 steps, verbal warning, teacher-student conference,
Sure.
parent contact. In upper school, detention, I don't think that's appropriate here, and then referral to the dean. It was like 5 steps, super clear, super simple, knowing there's like things in between there, but people knew what was up. This I look at and it's like,
It is very
woo,
wordy,
what is going on?
Yeah.
And, I get to feel like I don't even want to do this. And then under discipline, there's a discipline flow chart for Hollis Upper Elementary School, but there's none for HPS.
For HPS, yeah.
And even the flow chart, like, if I'm a parent that doesn't have experience in education and in like discipline theories and classroom management, et cetera, I could look at this and be like, what is this horizontal line? Is there a hierarchy here? I just feel there's a lot of room for confusion. And so I'm imagining myself as the parent who has never seen this before. Their kid gets assigned detention, your 7-year-old gets assigned detention. They're like, where did this come from? That's not clear. And one of the things that's referenced here is classroom rules. I went to a bunch of teacher websites to see if classroom rules were posted. Nobody has classroom rules posted that I could find. I looked at about 7 to 8 classroom websites and I asked my girls, hey, what are your classroom rules? And they just started rattling off a whole bunch of stuff. And I'm like, you don't know what your classroom rules are.
A lot of the classes actually vote on them.
Yeah, they create their rules and they
develop
post them
as
in
a
the
class
classroom.
Which
For
is
things,
awesome,
which is cool.
by the
So
way.
they may not be ready yet because they haven't voted on them yet.
Yeah, when we
being
went
this
to,
early at
like
school.
on Thursday, we went to every single classroom, and specifically at Hughes, we walked into 2 separate classroom discussions of what's a reasonable
The expectations,
rule? How do
rules,
we,
et cetera.
Which is fantastic. That is
really
that is what should be happening, and that's great. I guess just my point is, I feel like we could work on some clarity and simplification. And I personally, I don't want to approve this with those, I personally don't want to approve this with under 1, 2, and 3 not appealable. Something in that language I just feel sounds adversarial, and it sends the wrong message to parents. I think it could be read in many different ways, and it just kind of, it struck me immediately reading it, and that's what caused me to do all this, because it's not appealable. And I imagine other people would feel similarly.
I think it's a good point that the language sounds adversarial and nobody is reading this policy if things are great. You're not reading the student
Yeah.
policy about discipline for fun.
Yeah.
Rafi, do you have any discussion points you wanted to add?
No, I guess just, I thought those were really good points, but being that it's based on law, what is the wiggle room in terms of clarification and
Yeah.
simplification? Like, what width do we have to work with?
Yeah.
Do you know, Gina and Lauren? Do you know if there is any wiggle room here?
So I'm sure there's some level of wiggle room, but unfortunately we are required to have specifically student discipline and due process that identifies defining these, even though they're not really part of what we do.
I guess even like the language about non-appealable, could we make them appealable?
I mean, to my point earlier, I don't think number 1 is appealable because you can't go back in time. Doesn't mean you can't have a conversation, but could the language be softened? Probably. And so we will look and get guidance on that.
Sorry, I think I jumped in on you and you were still talking. I apologize for that.
All right. Any further discussion on JICD?
So this is similar to what Jess had asked for earlier. How would we, I mean, how do we procedurally proceed here?
Well, so I think this is my take. I obviously welcome yours. What we just brought up, I think, is important to show that we want to make specific changes. The other one that was withdrawn was just a question about the entire thing versus an individual change. While there are questions about this entire one, I think I would feel comfortable with accepting this first reading with changes moving forward. I also am looking at the schedule of what we're about to see is JIC is coming up into deliberation points. So I don't know if that's going to have an impact on what we want to do with this one. So I didn't make the motion, so I can't withdraw or change anything. I can call for a vote on the existing. Do you guys have a suggestion on this, knowing that JIC is coming up for review?
Yeah, I would recommend on this one, it's a first read. And there's nothing that says you have to stop at a third read. So you could have 10 readings. The difference here is this is specific to language that the board wants clarified, whereas the other one was more about the entire policy itself. So I would expect after some research that we're coming back to either say it has to be, is not appealable, or here's the wiggle room we have to rephrase it. So I would recommend a vote on the first read to keep it moving along, because there are pieces of it that we find uncomfortable or don't agree with, but overall the policy is required. And again, that doesn't mean you have to vote in the affirmative. Yep.
All right, so we are going to take our motion here to accept the first reading of policy GICD. All those in favor of accepting that first reading? All those opposed? First reading is accepted. And we look forward to hearing the response on wiggle room on that one. To see what action the board will take regarding EBCH, hazardous chemical safety provisions and hygiene plan, first reading. I'll accept a motion.
I move to accept the first reading of policy EBCH, hazardous chemical safety provisions and hygiene plan.
Second?
Second.
Discussion.
So this is another new policy. It is we have to report out to the state what we're doing, and we have to have a plan. The policy itself is not required by law, but having a plan is required as part of our, like I said, as part of our upload to the state. Makes sense to have a policy that's similar to some of the policies we've seen recently. Data governance, you need to have a data governance plan, and then the plan came after. The anti-discrimination plan came after the policy. So, you know, we can choose to have this. It is not required by law. You happen to be looking at a former chemical hygiene safety officer. So I do have extensive history with plans for districts, you know, both in Massachusetts and here. I decided that I was going to kind of put that forward when I was a chemistry teacher at the high school. So I have the plan from a year or 15 ago. And so we're looking at that and revising it. And so that's where this stems from. For the most part, we're talking in our elementary schools, all of the chemicals related to our custodial services. But certainly we do have a science lab at Hughes, and anything that is here now, potentially here from years ago, we need to make sure we have a plan. If there's a fire, we need to make sure that we're aware of where everything is located, and we can have that on file with the fire department.
Excellent. So where did this language come from?
School Board Association.
Perfect. I just have a couple of jumps. Is this okay if I jump in, guys? Is that all right? Just on, they're very small things,
Sure.
but under B2, there's a large blank line.
Yep.
What is supposed to go there? Or was that a placeholder and you guys filled it in and just we didn't get rid of the underline?
Yeah, so not really sure. Wasn't at, have you heard that yet? I wasn't at the meeting. I apologize.
That's what first
I don't
readings are
remember
for.
what is there, but that is what a first reading is for. I would imagine that because I wasn't there, the folks at the meeting probably weren't sure
We did
if
not
we
know.
had a plan. And,
Oh, got it. Okay.
Yes.
But you actually will see in the budget for under new items, we now have a stipend associated with making sure we're appropriately testing all of our eye wash stations, safety showers, and our cleanouts. So
Excellent. And then under B, where are we, 10? It says protocols for reporting general and has an open parens before non-emergency but doesn't have a closed. I'm assuming it's closed on the other end of emergency, but just want to clear that up.
okay.
Those were my only ones. Anyone else?
I have more little grammar things. You got a couple of mine there, Carol.
Got you.
So, nice. Under A, purpose. So again, I'm sorry to be nitpicky. So from the bottom of that first paragraph, if you go up 4 lines, you're going to see substances might be used and or stored, just a slash between and or.
Okay.
Yep.
B3, let me go down to B3. I just thought this was a little bit awkward. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. Special provisions for specific substances, e.g. and as pertinent.
Yeah, I don't know. If
I don't know why the EG is there. So I just wanted to bring
Sure.
attention to that because it just seems awkward. Under 7.
I'm sorry, and what number
Yes.
was that you just said?
That
It
was number
what?
B3.
B3, thank you. Okay.
Yes.
That's right there. At the end of that F, it also has a
Oh, a
semicolon.
semicolon. Yeah, good call. Number 7, B7. After the first semicolon, syllabi are established. Additionally, doesn't need to be capitalized there.
or just make it a period and make it additional.
Yeah, or it could be period.
There are
True.
a lot of semicolons at the ends of things that don't need
Oh,
to be.
yeah, because it's a list.
In
And
the,
so they
at the end of the
semicolon.
Well, they
numbers
missed
is
some of
correct.
them, that's why I was,
Well, not all are
maybe after 9.
student handbooks, yeah.
And then lastly, the copies. Where did I didn't put down where that is.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
copies.
Oh, and under C, capital C, the copies. I'm assuming that needs to be a lowercase c, and that's it. Just simple editorial
And I think you
things.
have yourself a job at School Board Association.
I'm just a nerdy English teacher who's now working.
any other feedback on policy EDCH or questions, comments?
I was just curious what, in the wording it says hazardous substances will be identified and inventory. Is there like a specific system, like using safety data sheets, or is it just one of those? Okay. So is it not put in there to just keep it more general? Sounds good. Thanks.
Excellent. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of accepting the first reading of policy EDCH? 400. And our final policy to look at tonight is to see what action the board will take regarding JIC, student conduct, first reading. I'll take a motion.
I move to accept the first reading of policy JIC, student conduct.
Second? Discussion.
So once again, new policy to Hollis. We had a policy of due process prior, and I don't have which J that is.
JIC.
No, the one that we had prior to. No, the one we already had. Anyway, but this is, so a lot of the content was there relative to the due process, and then the JIC D that we talked about already. But this is just required by law that we have this specific one.
And
This would also tie back to the handbook as well.
Yeah.
okay. But this language came from the law?
From School Board Association's interpretation of the law.
Got it.
I just, I don't have a problem with this policy. I think it just comes back to, for me, I would like to see something from the principals with some sort of revision of the handbook. As the handbook is referenced, everything is appropriate, I think, in this policy. But as it refers to the handbook, I think we need to take a second look at that going forward.
Well, part of this is now required that it comes to you. Part of this is that it is now required that the student handbook comes to you.
The last part was.
The student handbook comes to us. It's requiring that we get it.
Okay,
So under B, Code of Conduct,
yes,
it talks either the school board review each year, either separately or with the applicable student handbook. So this one is written in much more user-friendly language, much more kind of elementary language, whereas the other one seems to me it's almost like dealing with the high school. So we're going to have to figure out how to merge the two.
sure.
And that can often happen because I could be assigned to write one, and my background is middle school, high school principal and all that. Whereas I'm sure an elementary principal who is writing this one here kind of has set it up to be much more user-friendly.
So, am I to understand with what you're bringing up here, so the code of conduct shall be submitted to the school board for review each year, either separately or within the applicable student handbook. I don't recall, and maybe, I don't trust my brain sometimes, so I don't recall us looking over the student handbook last year. Maybe we did.
No, you wouldn't have.
We wouldn't
Policies
have.
would
So
not.
now, from now on, we will be doing that?
Right.
So that's something we can look forward to at some point this year? Okay.
And I think it's because if you went across the state, because policy is written for the entire state, there's been a definite disconnect maybe with what was in a handbook and what a school board was aware of.
Gotcha.
You know, not all communities have as much interaction or parental communication. Like an example was tonight, we're coming in to
Absolutely.
discuss the lice policy. There are some districts where that would never happen. So I think this is kind of forcing the issue of holding both boards and administration accountable.
Okay.
Any other discussion or questions? Seeing none, we can take a vote. All those in favor of accepting the first reading of policy JIC? 400. Good work, team. And now I will take a non-debatable motion.
Can I first just say, great job, policy. This was huge. I don't know if I've ever seen this many policies on an agenda. I mean, granted, I've only been on the board for a year, but
It's not.
And we're looking forward to Gina being at the next meeting.
I'd be surprised if you kept it within the 60-minute allotment. So this is a lot of work, and thank you for that, because it's hours to do this stuff for people at home. This is hours of work, so thank you.
Absolutely. All right, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
I'll move to adjourn.
Second,
Second.
all those in favor? See you next month with our 5th member. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.